I'd first like to say thank you to everyone who's here and joining our talk, and thank you to anyone who's been here since the start of the 24 hours. Perhaps we're getting closer to the end. Thank you, Wendy and Vlad, for organizing this. So this is our talk, Looking for Serendip, Feeling Zembla. Hopefully the combination of Serendip and Zembla will make more sense as we move forward into this talk. All right. So I guess we'd like to begin by saying that serendipity is a trip, but not only serendipity, perhaps discovery in general. That's kind of what we're trying to say here. We're trying to talk about discovery in general, perhaps more specifically, discovery in the realm of art, discovery in the realm of creativity. So serendipity or discovery is a trip in two senses. It's a trip in the literal sense, and I will come to make more sense of that in just a few minutes. But it is also a trip in the psychedelic sense. So Michael Pollan has a book called How to Change Your Mind. And towards the end of the book, he questions, whether when someone enters a psychedelic trip, whether there is a higher power, right? A lot of people who take psychedelics wonder after their trip whether there's something more to the world. And well, I guess his answer, not to spoil it too much, is that perhaps there is no higher truth, but there is still something there. Even though what you experience is an illusion, there is still something real to you that you're actually seeing. And this is kind of what we want to say about discovery too. Perhaps what we think the problem, if there is any problem in the talk of discovery and serendipity, is that perhaps some people couch discovery as something extra, something added. There is the thing, and then there is the discovery of the thing. But what we're trying to say is that, and this is a tentative thesis, is that discovery is not something added. It is extra layer. Discovery is the actual chaos itself. Rather than order, it is the chaos just parsed in a particular way. So if you take the chaos of your experience and you look closer into specific, maybe small world networks of that arrangement, you will find discovery. Similarly, Daniel Dennett speaks about consciousness. Consciousness is also not something extra. It is just the neural spikes itself. So maybe that is an analogy that can help you guys understand what we mean by this. So let's get into this real quickly. This is the image from our title page. This is to represent the Nova Zembla effect, which is where the word Zembla comes from. And this is another metaphor to sort of describe our concept. The Nova Zembla effect was first documented on the island of Nova Zembla, the north of Europe, northeast of Europe, highest most point of Russia. And pretty much what it means, it's an illusion in which you can see the sun rise long before it should. So even though it is not really there, you still see the sun. So that's the true experience to you. All right. So part one, my actual trip to Marseille. This is the literal trip. This is how this is what we meant as serendipity and discovery is a trip. And I went on this trip a while back to Marseille for a £5 ticket, and in a period of my life where I was seeking some enlightenment. And so here we go. This trip helped me elucidate this idea of discovery as is not something extra. So for example, the very first night I wake up in Marseille, and within the backdrop of Marseille, which is a very urban city, perhaps even considered a bit of a dangerous city, this was my breakfast. This was my morning. And as you can see, there is a lot of order in this picture. It is perhaps even Instagrammable. However, the interesting thing to sort of bring our point forward that we'd like you to notice from this image is that this order is not really created from order itself. It's created from chaos. In other words, my bed is just a mattress on the floor with a sleeping bag on it. It is just a specific arrangement of chaos that leads to sort of this nice image of awakening. Similarly, the city of Marseille itself represents this idea. The city wakes up to. In other words, the city has been built from many different cultures, of many different ethnicities. And one of the most beautiful things that I noticed from my trip to Marseille is that just how beautiful it was artistically. The walls are covered with graffiti, and there is graffiti painted over graffiti. So again, the idea here is that the city itself is created from this overlapping of chaos, as opposed to any particular structuring of the city. One of the great things that I discovered on this trip to Marseille was La Friche de la Belle de Mai, which is a space, a very hip space that has been created from an abandoned tobacco factory. These are the cigarettes that they used to create. And within this space, I found an exhibition, Par Hasard, which was an exhibition on serendipity. This exhibition itself could not have existed unless it was in the backdrop of this factory, and sort of with its abandoned nature, with its the particular space and the particular history of this place. That is why this exhibition could have existed. And within this exhibition, I found a very beautiful quote that perhaps explains this point that we're trying to make. This is from Da Vinci. He says, if you look at walls smeared with stains or made of stones of various kinds, and if you have to imagine some scene, you will see there multifaceted landscapes adorned with mountains, rivers, boulders, trees, plains, great valleys, and various groups of hills. Again, what he's saying here is that if you look at a textured wall, and if you look at it really closely, you will see something there. You will see some art. You will see perhaps whatever your imagination can come up with. But again, it's not you drawing something on this wall. It is not you adding something onto this wall. It is taking the exact sort of order and chaos of that wall and seeing within it what you would like to see, and discovering within it what you'd like to see. Again, this is the idea that discovery is not an added layer. It is itself the chaos, perhaps zoomed in, focused in different ways. At this point, I exited the exhibition and I took Da Vinci to the streets. So I went to see myself if I could create art, using this technique, right? And so if you see here on the left, this is the Google Street View of this place right at the top of a hill in Marseille. And when I went there, just like in this image, it was a huge construction site, right? And I was like, well, this is very ugly. This is not what I was seeing on the Google images. So in order to take the picture that I took on the right, I had to work around that chaos. I had to work around that construction site to frame that image in a beautiful way that, again, you could post on a social media. And if you were to look at the image on the right, you would never expect that immediately to my left, there was a construction site going on. This is another example. If you look at the left, the Google Street View of this little wall piece right here, there is a lot of chaos going on. There's a lot of disorder. And nothing really stands out on its own. You have garbage cans, bins, you have aircon units, you have local stores. And I guess the point here is that in order for this to stand out, it needs to be couched in this chaos. If you look at the art piece more closely on the right, it is a beautiful mixture of sort of wallpaper / graffiti / paint. And again here, with the motif of chaos is the fact that this art piece would not really exists as an art piece without the peeling at the bottom. This is what caught my eye, the fact that you could have this sort of 2D, 3D interplay of artwork. And even more so, this art piece could not exist if it was not couched in this chaos that allowed me to single it out from all of this sort of confusion. This is another example. Sort of in the exhibition, there was a piece by an artist called Sophie Kai, and in her quote, in her caption, she says, "I followed strangers on the road, then finally I would lose them from sight and forget about them." And her art piece was she would take pictures of strangers that she would follow around. And she makes it a point to say that she would not follow them for any particular reason. She would just follow them to see where they'd go and just snap. So again, she would work with the chaos and the random order of the strangers. Similarly, what I did here on the right is, at some point I turned a corner and I found an artist at work. Perhaps you can't really see him, and that is the irony of this picture. But here it is, again, a stranger caught in his moment. And if I hadn't sort of seen this exhibition, and if I hadn't sort of used chaos in this manner, I would never have snapped this picture. More so, if I were to go back there today, there probably would be no artist. Maybe a new person would have moved in. Perhaps the Vespa would have changed color, etc. And this brings us sort of now to Joe's part and to how we came together. When we learned about Creativity Week, we sort of embodied the idea of doing it in one day from the start, because Joe came up to me one morning and said, "What are you doing today?" "Well, we have this deadline for this afternoon, and if you'd like, we could spend an entire day organizing our ideas into an abstract." And so that is what we did. We sat in the chaos of this cafe and brought the chaos of our thoughts together to create this abstract. And what happened is that from this moment onwards, the conversation around this presentation and around Marseille completely developed from sort of that chaos onwards. So here's where I pass it on to Joe.
Yeah, so I'll have the voice and maybe the video, although we do see Thomas now, but that's okay. Thomas is gonna click ahead and get me to the next slide. Thank you. So yeah, so I didn't get to go to Marseille in person. So I was a little sad about that. So I thought, well, how can I catch up? How can I continue to be part of this dialogue? So I happened by chance, of course, to see this book written up in The Guardian. And I thought, well, that's cool. I kind of like noir. So I read this, and this shows up on the first page. It says, a post-industrial city might be defined by the distance that separates it from its golden age, because it's at the heart of that space-time, when a page of glorious history has been turned, that the mythologies and fantasies, the resentments and nostalgias that play a part in shaking up and rebuilding its identity are formed. So that's cool. And by the way, Thomas has just given this presentation. Let's click ahead. But this presentation that Thomas just showed has been informed by the discussions that we had of a bunch of different things. He's presented it as a narrative of his trip to Marseille. Meanwhile, by the time, this all happened a year ago. So meanwhile, we've had lots of time to think about it. Meanwhile, we both kind of been traveling together through this virtual space of different references and illusions, and thinking about serendipity and thinking about cognitive science. We met already years before the trip, and I had met Thomas. I gave him this book, Chance Chasing Creativity. I thought hey, Thomas, you might like this. I didn't know years ahead we would have been like surveying all this space. I thought it'd be great if we could become friends, but I didn't realize like, oh, we're going to become collaborators and move through this interesting space together. So maybe just as an example, I was thinking like, what are all the different things about Marseille? There's Marseille Noir. For some reason, I got my bee in my bonnet that I had to read up on the tarot. So I read this Jodorowsky book about the tarot. He talks about the Marseille tarot. I'm just like, okay, it's all in there. So let's go to the next one. We can come back to this if there's time. Basically, preparing for Creativity Week changed everything, because those images that Thomas was showing before started to become symbols. They started to become pretty obviously interpretable to me anyway. Again, maybe using the Da Vinci quote, like, oh, this isn't just the artist at work. This is, this is the tower from the Marseille Tarot. And look, these two bicycles are like these two funny figures at the bottom of the tower. So it's like, again, Thomas didn't see that or think that when he was there in person, but now it's become this funny, weird symbol, along with many others, which we wouldn't have time to talk about, in this virtual world that we're exploring together. So yeah, let's go on to the next slide. And this, I would like to bring Thomas back in after I read out this quote at a little bit more length. It says here, what is the opposite of Serendip? A southern land of spice and warmth, lush greenery and hummingbirds, sea-washed, sun-blasted. Think of another world in the far north, barren, icebound, cold, a world of flint and stone. Call it Zembla, ergo Zemblanity, the opposite of serendipity, the faculty of making unhappy, unlucky, and expected, unhappy, unlucky, and expected discoveries by design. Serendipity and Zemblanity, the twin poles of the axis around which we revolve. And that's really our discovery. That's what we discovered. In fact, Thomas came up with this lovely iconic representation of that. So maybe he needs to go paint it on a wall in Marseille sometime. But for now, I'll let him talk about it.
Right. So the word, I guess, that we came up with, quite comically, is just Zembladipity. You take Zemblanity, you take serendipity together, you put them, and you combine them. That's what you get. And this is sort of what we wanted from the start. We were trying to understand how you could build discovery and meaning from perhaps chaos, perhaps failure. And so this is where that word comes from. The idea being that the workstation is chaos itself. You build things out of chaos. You don't necessarily build them out of order, and you build order out of chaos, not order out of order. So similarly, without the cigarettes, there would have been no gallery in that abandoned factory. Without the peeling in the wallpaper, there would have been no artwork. And if anything, if we were presenting anything to this audience, this presentation itself serves as a case study of this idea, the way that it was formed over time with all of our ideas combining. This is why, I guess I'll get there in an end, but in a second, there is an appendix to this presentation with a bunch of slides that we didn't use. And that, again, is the idea that we started off with the chaos, the same way you start off with many drafts, and then you sort of zoom in on that part that makes sense for an audience, right? And with this, we get to the ending. This is a picture that sort of serves as a dichotomy to the one that we got at the title page. And what we're trying to say here, these are the sort of explosions that were done on the island of Nova Zembla, the nuclear testing. And I guess what we want to say here is, although we're presenting the idea that discovery is nothing added, that isn't to say that discovery isn't real, and that isn't to say that discovery doesn't have real effects. Even though we are working with the chaos that already exists in this world, when you zone in on that chaos and then sort of manipulate it and take control of it, you can create things like atomic bombs that then go back, feedback into that chaos and create perhaps a lot of issues.
So one more slide, if you don't mind.
Yep.
There we go. Zemblanity is a trip too. So it's the same conclusions. And if you were to come to our talk and see the first slide, you say, oh, well, it's really optimistic, psychedelic trip or whatever. Well, let's keep in mind that like the psychedelic trip it could be unhappy. And just because it's psychedelic doesn't mean it doesn't change the world. So, so yeah, with the exception of the appendix where we have many more slides, that's the end of what we were going to present to you today. And if there is any time, we could go for questions. But yeah, maybe Thomas can just flip through this real quickly. That'd be awesome.
That's fantastic. Thank you. If people want to put a question in the chat while they're flicking through, that'll be what people said. We haven't got to that. Yeah, that'd be amazing if you could have predicted that one. If people have questions to go in the chat, or if you want to unmute, if you're happy for your voice to be up on YouTube, then feel free. I've got too many windows open right now. I had a question then. I'm just waiting a little bit for to give people a bit of time. No, well, I'll ask my question because I like asking my questions. That's the point of sharing it, right? So I was interested then. So how much do you think this ties in? Now I know that you haven't, because of done stupidly started at midnight, so you haven't been here for a lot of the talks. But what we've actually come up a couple of times is that there is a tendency to see patterns in noise that might be more pronounced in different sorts of people, so that the same thing can be experienced subjectively differently by different people. And this seems to be an important theme that keeps coming up. How much do you think that sort of some part of that plays into what you were saying just now?
Joe, if you have any ideas with regards to this.
It sounded like that might be going into a cognitive science direction, but let's keep it at the literary level for now. It's just to say, like, you know, this whole piece has been presented as a dialogue, right? It's been presented, even though in the part where Thomas was speaking, for him and me, we had this background, like that blue slide with all the different samples ranging around in our mind. So we've had many different perspectives, not just our two perspectives. One of the references on there that I quite like, which we didn't get to talk about, was a book I haven't finished reading called The Master and His Emissary, which basically talks about how we've got two brains in our head. Each one of us has two brains in our head. The right-hand side basically seeing things as wholes, and the left-hand side seeing things decomposed into parts and stuff like that. And those two are to some extent in a dialogue with each other. Like Thomas and I are in a dialogue, have been in a dialogue with each other creating this work. But they really do think about things in very different ways. And that's us, both of us. I mean, all of us thinking about things in a dichotomous way all the time. So that is a cognitive science thing. So if Thomas had anything else to say about that, we can hand it over to him, but that's my immediate thought.
Yeah, just to jump in, I think you're definitely right. And it is very much cognitive science. I even think it's quite meditative, if that makes any sense. I think the sort of crux here is a matter of attention. And I think what Joe and I discovered very, very well, and a lot of people who work in teams have discovered, is that when your attention is brought into, you know, focus on different things and perhaps has different scope, you're obviously going to look at the same thing differently. And that is probably one of the most interesting things about working in a team, is trying to share, you know, get that attention to the same place. I think that's what it is. It's looking at again, working on a metaphor, looking at that chaos differently, or perhaps from a different perspective.
Fantastic. And also I feel like we are slightly over time now, but I feel like I should add a bit of a story into this, because I think you two probably realize, but most people won't have done, because Thomas submitted the abstract to this when it was cancelled or postponed last summer, and then said, no, but we should do it online. And I said, okay, well, we'll do something online then. So we did something online together that then turned into a series of symposia. Now I think we've got our fourth one planned. We've got our third and our fourth plans coming up now, of different aspects of serendipity specifically done. So this sort of this spinning off that you can see, and often we don't get a chance to track those stories either. So we don't know what effect that these things have had, and it's nice when you get those moments where they just come together and you can see that this chaos does turn into some sort of different parts of order. So thank you very much, both for starting off an entire series of symposia, but also for a really interesting presentation. Thank you.
Wendy?
Thank you, Meg. Yep.
I just want to say that in Holland, where painting is holy, like theater in England and literature in France and music in Germany, the quote of Da Vinci is used in every art school, and every young painter has to know this quote ad verbum. It's still used today as part of their training in the literal sense of the word.
Thank you, Peg.
By the way, the word hazard comes from Arab. It is the Arab word for the stone with 6 planes with which you play. All the words referring to the unexpected come down to fall. Chance is from cadere. Casus juridicum, casus morbi. The word fortuitous has to do with falling. The word chance also. Falling is in language the oldest metaphor for something that arrives to you, that happened to you. Is it clear?
Yes, thank you very much, Peg. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you. I think I'm going to hand over to Vlad for a bit now to sort of come to an interim summary. Vlad, how are you enjoying it?
Hello, hi everyone. Thank you so much for the great presentation. I was inspired. I took note of the new term, maybe future events dedicated to it. I think we have about 5 minutes before we go to the next big panel and keynote. So I'm not entirely sure we can make a full summary of points. I know you, Wendy, you had a few points in mind that you would like to raise at this intermediate moment, almost 12 hours in. Do you want to share? Do you have a few ideas that you took from the first 12 hours?
Yeah, so
I sent it back to you. Do you see?
Thank you. So, well, I think I had to miss a little bit to go and sleep on the sofa, but actually, what I found really interesting about everything so far is, like I said, and maybe I'm a pattern finder. Things seem to sort of coalesce around certain things. We've had these ideas about inspiration. What I found particularly fascinating is how that inspiration has been social. So people have seen it between people. So artists have found their inspiration from other people, and those other people may not be actual people, or sort of a dialogue with previous writers or previous artists, and also a stretching forward dialogue. Or in the case of Martin's work, the sort of the social, the benefits of this sort of social engagement, which I think is super interesting at the moment, because a lot of the tropes of scientific discovery are that it's an engagement with material, whereas what we seem to be seeing is it's an engagement with people that's really important. Right. The other things would be as well, obviously we had some time to think about education. That came up quite often at the start of the morning. However many hours ago, it was 11 o'clock at night for me last night. And this how we can develop these spaces where people feel safe, where people can be happy with uncertainty and happy with the discomfort of uncertainty. And I think that plays as well into the stuff that Joe and Thomas was saying, that we can't have control isn't generative in the same way as chaos is, but an education system very much demands control, and we tend to control even down to this right wrong notion that Gerard brought up, or the right wrong idea of questions and answers. When teachers ask questions, and they have to be so much in control that unless you give exactly the right answer. So this sort of tension between how we move through life with control and how we bring a freer sense into the education system, whilst also, I suppose, not losing everything as well. I thought that was quite good, but I still have been, and if anybody hasn't seen it, I think it's the talk that moved me most was Monica's talk on how Black children in Brazil experienced that their hopes and ambitions for creativity, and it was really moving because they were, as to summarize, they really felt they had no chance to be creative. There'd be no opportunity for them to be creative. And this notion of, okay, so is actually serendipity something that everyone can experience, or are there these power dynamics, are there these resources that are needed to experience creativity or serendipity that some groups will just always be excluded from? So I really think that's a really important talk. If there's only one you're going to watch back from, I think that will probably be the one that will get my vote.
Absolutely, I would recommend watching everything
To
just in another full day.